Hey guys, in part 3 of the book, we're on chapter 13. The buck stops here. You know, once we get past all the issues in our own life and we begin to work on our marriage, then we get to our kids and our extended families, and it can get really messy at that point, and it can stay messy in a lot of areas for a lot of years. But one of the things we have to understand as a Christian man is this really is about the buck stopping here. It's time to not blame the kids. It's time to not blame your family or your siblings or anybody else as adults. It's time to take responsibility and do what you got to do to make things as healthy and as right as possible. And that's really a lot of what this chapter is about. Here's a few principles to make sure that you hit and touch on in this chapter. Number one, after we put the hard work into our marriage, then parenting is going to be next. And a lot of people today kind of tend to flip that. They'll really work hard at parenting and let the marriage be second. But really making sure our marriage is healthy first is the best thing to do for our kids. So that's the next step. So we've got to make sure we understand how we apply this lazy man, heavy-handed, my way of the highway guy, not just to marriage, but also to parenting, and deal with that. And then I give a really practical exercise that seemed to help a lot of guys of walking you through how to sit down with your kids and have a really honest talk with them about how you're doing as a dad and how can you help them and how can you improve. And man, it's a really cool thing to empower your kids and also get some really great feedback and also open up maybe a new channel of communication you never had with your kids before. That's a really important part of this chapter. Number 3, some of the most stressful things that we are going to do in our lives is, especially as adults, and especially after we get families, especially if there's a lot of siblings and there's other kids involved, is to deal with those relationships and the issues and the problems that happen with in-laws and sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws and all those kind of things coming in. That can get really sticky at times. So it's really important to talk through those aspects and to navigate that. Number 4, talking about being a dad, facing the fact, are we tending to be a bailout dad? Are we tending to be a bullying dad? And really deal with that. Number 5, we move out from a parenting and extended family and move into our circles of influence and how we sometimes can be a chameleon socially and kind of change and move our identity with the room, and just the dangers of that and how that does not make us feel secure as men, and how Christ wants us to be the same guy everywhere we are. Number 6, throughout the Gospels, in answer to that, we see Jesus constantly being just the king of consistency. Like he was always the same guy everywhere he went, and how that should encourage us to model, again, a reason to model our lives after him. Lastly, number 7, the realization that God created each of us with an identity, with a personality, with a gifting, with a skill set that he allowed for us. And if we are good enough for God in those areas, then we're good enough for every other situation in life. And so he has put his stamp of approval on us in our marriage and our parenting, with our families, extended families, and on all our circles of influence. And so we need to learn how to be the same guy, God's man, in all of those different areas. Okay? All right, discussion questions for chapter 13. Number 1, discuss these concepts. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. Relationship with no rules equals running all over you. And then the biblical balance, relationship with the right rules equals righteousness. Talk about those. Question number 2. Talk through the father-children discussion that's on page 159 through 161 that I laid out. And how can you practically do this with your own kids? Question number 3. Discuss the concept of a parent not allowing for the reality that their son is now an adult, the parents of an adult son, and maybe that's happening to you, or maybe it's someone in your group. Talk through that and talk about the babying, bullying points. Question number 4. How different do you parent from your parents, and why? Question number 5. Why can it be so difficult to sit down and talk as an adult man with our parents on issues that have been there for maybe many years? How is it so difficult to bring up the elephant in the room sometimes with our adult parents as adult men? Question number 6. How did you feel about the affirmation on page 164 that God believes in you as a husband and a father? And if you truly believed and acted on that and bought into that, like, what would that change in your life? Question number 7. On the chameleon concept, how much do you struggle with that balance? How many rooms are you in, and how much do you change in those rooms? Where are the areas in your life where you're tempted to actually kind of role play and not be yourself? Question number 8. Consider the places and circumstances where you are completely comfortable with who you are. What are the differences in those two environments versus anywhere you feel like a chameleon versus where you're completely comfortable? The ones where you tend to change and the ones where you tend to don't. Talk about that contrast. Question number 9. What are some practical steps you need to take to be the same guy in every room, just like we see in the life of Christ? Question number 10. What are some things you believe God may want you to do in your family, your extended family, or your circles of influence? Where might He be calling you to be proactive and make some changes here?